Stephen Kinnock.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd like to thank the Backbench Business Committee for securing this important debate, and I'd like to pay tribute to the Chair of the Select Committee for her powerful opening speech and for the outstanding work that she is doing on these issues. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Home Office spending figures detailing an astronomical overspend of £5.9 billion last year represent such a shockingly cavalier attitude to taxpayers' money that it really does beg a belief. Two-thirds of that £5.9 billion was for asylum costs, a staggering £4.3 billion overspend over the past 12 months, taking the total spend on emergency asylum hotels and asylum seeker support up to a quite astonishing £5.4 billion. These costs also include a whopping £1.2 billion to pay for the implementation of the Illegal Migration Act, which, let us not forget, has not even been implemented yet. We also know that should the government manage to be able to realise its fever dream of sending asylum seekers rather than Home Secretaries to Rwanda, the first 300 will cost an astonishing £570 million and account for just 1% of the 30,000 asylum seekers who crossed the Channel in small boats last year. That works out at almost £2 million per asylum seeker, Madam Deputy Speaker. Just let that sink in for a minute. £2 million of British taxpayers' money to send one asylum seeker to Rwanda. Madam Deputy Speaker, the country knows it, this House knows it, the Home Secretary knows it, and the Minister knows it. The Rwanda scheme is the worst value for money policy in history. Now, the Conservatives will point to the asylum seekers crossing the Channel, and it is correct to say that more than 100,000 have made that perilous journey since 2018, which is when the party opposite started to well and truly lose control of our borders. It's also correct to say that of that 100,000, a staggering 40,000 have crossed since the current Prime Minister was appointed by default, which tells you all you need to know about his vacuous Stop the Boat pledge and how it's going. We on these benches are clear that tackling the Tory boats chaos cannot be achieved through headline-chasing gimmicks such as the Rwanda plan, which just absorb vast amounts of money, time and resources. Instead, we need a laser-like focus on the practical, common-sense measures that get the job done, which is why Labour has set out a detailed plan to smash the criminal smuggler gangs that are running Britain's borders and trading in human misery. If this government cannot restore order to the border, Madam Deputy Speaker, then the next Labour government will. But the fact of the matter is that the asylum backlog had already grown fourfold even before the small boats started coming in large numbers. It was the Conservative government's decision to downgrade the seniority of asylum decision-makers in 2013 that led to the backlog spiralling due to slower, poorer quality decision-making and larger numbers of appeals, plus high staff turnover, resulting in the total chaos that we are now seeing. Let's not forget that the government has an estate of more than 50,000 relatively cost-effective asylum beds that keep the system within budget. But the use of nearly 400 hotels last year to house as many as 56,000 asylum seekers at any one time has sent costs through the roof. According to the House of Commons Library, spending on asylum hotels and support has increased by an astonishing 733% in the last 5 years alone. This is what happens when you try to cut corners and cut costs, Madam Deputy Speaker. You end up paying 10 times as much in the long term, clearing up the mess that you've made. It is the definition of a false economy. Labour has a plan to clear the backlog within 1 year by surging the number of caseworkers, thus saving the taxpayer £2 billion in hotel bills. We will also create a new returns unit with 1,000 immigration enforcement officers to remove people from safe countries who have failed in their asylum claims. These are the key pillars of our plan for a firm, fair and well-managed asylum system. Of course, Madam Deputy Speaker, Britain faces a forced migration challenge caused by increasing geopolitical turbulence and the proliferation of authoritarian regimes, with violence and persecution spreading across the world. But this government has completely and utterly failed to rise to that challenge. Successive Home Secretaries have had ample opportunity since the small boats started coming in large numbers in 2018 to work with our European partners and allies to end the vile trade of people smuggling in the Channel. But rather than seeking to engage constructively, they've spent the last 6 years trashing their working relationships with our European neighbours through their damaging rhetoric and frequent promises to break or ignore international laws and treaties. They have traded hard graft, quiet diplomacy and common sense for unworkable legislation and headline-chasing gimmicks that are not based on reality and are therefore destined to fail. And meanwhile, the public's been forced to watch on helplessly as the criminal gangs have taken hold, with prosecutions of people smugglers down a startling 34% since 2010. We are clear that cooperation with Europe is the only way to restore our border security. Labour has promised a cross-border police unit to go after the criminal gangs upstream by forging a new security partnership with Europol, based on intelligence sharing and joint working, paid for by redirecting some of the vast sums of money that are being squandered on the Rwanda shambles. So, given the central role that the Minister is playing in all this, I have the following questions for him. The Prime Minister had promised to end the use of hotels for asylum seekers by the end of last year. Can the Minister therefore explain why, at the end of December, there were still more than 46,000 asylum seekers in hotel accommodation? Second, we now know that hundreds of millions of pounds have been committed to the Rwandan government as part of the Tories' failed plan. Can the Minister tell me how much of that the UK will get back if no flights take off? Can the Minister explain why the Rwanda money couldn't have been invested in border security instead? Does the Minister truly believe that spending nearly £2 million on every person sent to Rwanda just to get a few symbolic flights off the ground, to quote a previous immigration minister, in an election year, represents good value for taxpayers' money? And does he agree that Rwanda is the worst value for money policy in history? The NAO revealed that the Home Office would spend £11,000 per person on flights to Rwanda. Can the Minister explain why taxpayers are paying 11 times as much as a commercial flight would cost? Madam Deputy Speaker, the failures of the Home Office ministers are not just impacting their own budgets and overspends, they're causing severe challenges for other government departments and for local councils. As my honourable friend, the chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee, has pointed out, a huge amount of this is being channelled through Overseas Development Aid, or ODA. That is having a huge impact in terms of the amount of ODA that is available to spend in countries which are generating large numbers of asylum seekers, and also in countries which neighbour those countries. So it really is a lose-lose situation. The money that should be being spent to address push factors is instead being spent on hotel bills here in this country. So can the Minister also set out whether he feels that it is a viable long-term strategy to be using ODA in this way? And does he agree that it is the very definition of robbing Peter to pay Paul and working against the strategic objectives of ODA and of what any sensible government should be doing in terms of addressing the crisis that we're facing in our asylum system? The latest estimates are part of a long-running and increasingly predictable pattern. The Home Office goes cap in hand to the Treasury, asking for billions of pounds over and above what was already a multi-billion pound annual budget to deal with a set of crises entirely of the government's own making. The Treasury then duly signs blank cheque upon blank cheque to the Home Office, and yet still somehow manages to make matters worse. Ministers are trying to claim an alternative to Rwanda would somehow be more expensive. But the problem with that argument is they're comparing the Rwanda plan to the cost of doing nothing. They are not comparing the Rwanda plan to Labour's common sense plan to go after the gangs, to get removals back up and running, and to clear the backlog. Madam Deputy Speaker, the other immigration minister, I think it was, once said that it is not acceptable to spend £8 million a day, equivalent to some 3 billion a year on the asylum system. I couldn't agree more. It should not be necessary to remind him that it's on his party's watch that the cost of the asylum system has rocketed tenfold since 2010. That, Madam Deputy Speaker, is why those on the benches opposite need to get out of the way, so that we on these benches can restore order at our border and fix this broken and unaffordable Tory asylum system. So let's have that general election, and let's have it now. Thank you.